What's going on, guys? This is Joe, and I am back once again for part 2 of our Dominaria-Vorthos booster box opening. So I decided, since Dominaria is this kind of nostalgia-themed set, there's so much lore steeped in the plane of Dominaria, that I was going to do this opening a little bit differently. If you missed the first one, I'll have it linked at the end for all of you to go check out. I'm going to do this column today, because I feel like it. Why the hell not? I'm going to leave that last column for part 3. But we have a whole stack of packs to open, and we are going to open them, right? Value is always nice, but honestly, we are going to talk a lot more about the story implications of the cards that we open and the things that we're looking at today. So let's see what we have in this first one. If I can ever get it open. There we go. So we have Invoke the Divine, classic Church of Sarah themed cards. You'll see the stained glass windows in the back, which is very banalish for Benalia and things like that. We have a Vidalian Arcanist. It's really nice to see there are merfolk here, which is cool. It kind of goes along with the Ixalan themes of the merfolk tribal, but Dominaria is known to have merfolk as well, and they're the Vidalian merfolk, so it's nice to see those specific merfolk back and being named in that way. We have a Cabal Paladin. Once again, the Cabal being kind of the overarching bad guys for this particular story arc, and this is just your kind of generic knight bad guy for the Cabal. Not anybody in particular, not anyone that I believe we even saw depicted in art form in the stories, but just another one of your generic bad guys for the Cabal. We have an Adventurous Impulse. Again, traveling the world of Dominaria, the plane of Dominaria, adventure, that whole kind of broad theme, but combined with the beautiful landscapes of Dominaria itself. We have a Fiery Intervention. So this depicts the moment where Chandra, who I didn't expect to see a ton of when we saw her at the beginning of the story, saying, I'm going to go too, guys. I know Nissa just left, but I am too. Have fun, Gideon and Liliana, kind of having your own story together. But she kind of shows up 2/3 of the way through and meets up with kind of Karn's automatons fighting with Multani's treefolk. And she decides that the automatons are the better option to help. And so this is kind of her deciding between the two sides of who she's going to help, who's crazy and who's not. And we eventually see that, you know, both come to an agreeable end, but that didn't quite end well for this particular treefolk. Then we have a Blood Tallow Candle. This, as far as I know, is not anything in particular. I think it's just kind of, Whisper is named here at the bottom as the quote being mentioned. So this is just regular Cabal, scary spookiness. But Whisper is a character that was named, that we met in the story. And so they are now being given a quote at the bottom of the card as well. We have a Demonic Vigor, once again, general Cabal nastiness, a demon being Demon Lord Belzenlock. If he likes you, maybe you get some Demonic Vigor. Call the Cavalry, once again, Banalish Knights are kind of a thing. They're a sub-theme in the set, so here you go. Once again, kind of generic stuff there. Here's Ancient Animus, once again, depicting Multani versus Karn. So this is kind of the crazed version of Multani, which we see Chandra able to soothe, which is what puts her in proper favor with Jaya, aka Mother Luti. So that was kind of an interesting moment. A Power Stone Shard. Power Stones are a huge deal in the history of Dominaria. You had Urza's Eyes in general as the Power Stones. You had Power Stones powering most things, including the Weatherlight itself. And this being a Power Stone Shard, I like the flavor of this card being able to tap it and add a colorless mana for each artifact you control named Power Stone Shard, so that if you have a bunch, it just shows how powerful the Power Stones really are, because combined together, they charge each other up, and it shows that they are more and more and more powerful the more that you have with you. So that's really cool. We have Nature's Spiral as our first uncommon in the pack. This card is really cool because if you look at the old Wasteland art, or I'm sorry, Strip Mine art, it was this cavern. And it was kind of looked at from the side, but you got to see kind of the levels that are being shown here, kind of having been stripped. It was a strip mine, right? And so they were stripping the resources from the land, and here it is growing back. And it says, nature cannot be destroyed, only changed. That's just a portion of the quote from the flavor text, but regardless, it's just a way of showing that, you know, there is change on Dominaria. You go from the strip mine to it building itself back up again, which is really, really cool. We have a Sage of Latinam. So there are a bunch of artificers on Dominaria. You have characters like Joyra, older characters like Venser, who were big into artificing, maybe studying at the Talarian Academy. In fact, it specifically says it down here, the College of Latinam, including the first Talarian Academy. So there you go. Just another subset of study within the Talarian Academy. We have a Memorial to Glory. Once again, giving all of these give callbacks to older things in the stories. This one, being white, is focused on Benalia because that is the kind of white-themed city-state or cityscape. And our legendary rare or mythic is Traxos, Scourge of Krug. So another example of, it's an artifact construct, most likely from Mishra, left over from Mishra, Urza's brother, from the Brothers' War. There's a ton of these things around, whether they are dormant or not. This one, Traxos, being very much alive, but it kind of shows how rusted out he is and old, because he doesn't like to untap, which means he's not often active, but casting historic spells untaps him and makes him active. So it kind of shows what it might take for Traxos to awaken. So that's kind of cool. The flavor of that is nice. Behind that, a Plains and a Saproling token. This Saproling token being made by Slimefoot flavorfully because you can see the Weatherlight in the background. Next pack. Let's see what this one has for us. Apparently not much if I'm not able to open it. Okay, there we go. That's much better. Okay, so we start with a Knight of Benalia. Once again, kind of generic Knight Benalia theme. Befuddle, just a generic spell being used here. This one quotes Joyra on it, part blue mage that she is. We have a Skirk Prospector. Once again, there's a Goblin sub-theme because goblins were kind of a big deal on original Dominaria. There's not really much going on goblin-wise here, which is unfortunate, but you do have common versions of goblins like this Skirk Prospector, so there you go. Again, just callbacks to original goblins on Dominaria. Sergeant-at-Arms, once again, Banalish Knights. A Drudge Skeleton, a Drudge Sentinel, kind of hearkening back to Drudge Skeleton, and you can tap it, or you can tap 3, tap it, and it gains Indestructible, which is also a callback to Regeneration, which would allow the Drudge Skeletons to live through combat damage, but they would, when you regenerated them, they would tap. So this is basically saying, hey, if you weren't aware, if you hadn't heard Mark Rosewater saying that they're replacing Regeneration with Indestructible, here you go. It's basically, you tap it and it becomes indestructible. You have essentially regenerated it. You have a Llanowar Envoy. Many Llanowar elves, no pun intended, elves of Llanowar, if you will, from Dominaria. Pretty iconic. So here is a Llanowar Envoy. Like most Llanowar elves, helping you, in this case, kind of filter your mana. It's kind of an expensive way of doing it, but if you're splashing, this is not the worst way of doing it. Maybe it is. I don't know. Then we have a Caligo Skin Witch. Once again, this is another example of generic Cabal enemy. We have a Keldon Overseer. So the Warlords of Keld, kind of a big deal on Dominaria. They build their war hosts. They use their war hosts to fuel their magic. And here you have basically an Overseer taking control of one of your opponent's creatures. being very charismatic and powerful, and being able to do with them what they wish, and yeah, just getting loyalty and fealty from them is kind of their thing. We have a Baloth Gorger, once again, just big, scary beasts. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Guardians of Koilos. So we have the Caves of Koilos. Now we have some automatons, some constructs guarding the caves. We did see a story of Teferi kind of delving with his daughter into one of, not necessarily of Koilos, I actually don't specifically recall, but it's possible, but delving into one of Urza's old training areas, if you will, or an area where an artifact was hidden, and Teferi was able to go in and get it, but it was hidden behind a version of a trap or a riddle, very reminiscent of Dungeons & Dragons or Legend of Zelda kind of a thing, where you have to complete a puzzle, or Uncharted, even if you want to use a more modern example, where you have to complete a puzzle to get an artifact. There's many different things. That's very Lara Croft, very Indiana Jones. There's a lot of different examples, but these are the guardians outside of the Caves of Koilos, where you might want to go and get some fun old things. Once again, Sentinel of the Pearl Trident, more merfolk in the first uncommon in this pack. Settle the Score is our story spotlight. What this art doesn't show, this is our second to last story spotlight, third of four. What this doesn't show, I mean, this shows Liliana killing Belzenlok and finally accomplishing her goal of finishing off Belzenlok. But what it doesn't show is what the story tells us, is that Liliana did it with the Blackblade, because Gideon tried and wasn't as successful fighting Belzenlok. Belzenlok was able to kind of parry and dodge and things like that. And so Liliana took up the sword when Gideon was kind of batted away, and she's like, all right, fine, I'll do it myself. And she thought herself to be unsuccessful, but had actually stabbed into Belzenlok's leg with it, either when she dropped it or what have you. And it started to drain Belzenlok's soul, because, spoilers, that's what it does. It drains the soul of who is stabbed or killed by it. And yeah, so it was actually Liliana, even though the Blackblade itself, I mean, maybe we'll see it, but I'm not, I'm not keeping my fingers crossed or anything. But the flavor text on the Blackblade even says, something to the effect of, like, let's see how Gideon does wielding this. And turns out it was Liliana who used it to the most effectiveness, and honestly, to its only effectiveness. It's not like, Gideon still has it, which is important going into the fight with Nicol Bolas, to see if he has the courage to use it, and if he will only use it on Bolas, or if maybe Tezzeret or Ralzeric or somebody like that is going to meet the tip of the Blackblade. We shall see. But yeah, a lot to go along with this picture, but I guess obviously they don't want to give it away by showing the Blackblade. So yeah, here is your art for Settle the Score. I mean, gorgeous, right? Very colorful, and it looks really awesome. And then we have our saga. Our rare is Fall of the Thran. Once again, a lot of these sagas looking like things that you might see in a museum depicting, I mean, they're sagas, right? Depicting old school historic moments for the plane. This one looking like a wall carving, right? Or something carved into marble, for example, and this showing the Fall of the Thran. I mean, you have a lot of different old school Thran mana creators, like the Thran Dynamo and things like that, that were old Thran machines that were left around even after the Thran went away. So, and these I could, we could make entire videos on just each of these sagas alone. I won't, but I encourage each of you, if you are not aware, to go look up some of the backstory behind it. Just a cursory Google search will allow you to find out stuff like that. So there's the Fall of the Thran. And then we have Tatiova, Benthic Druid, one of the few, I would think, legendary creatures that are in this set that were not in some way in the story, even if it was just a cameo appearance. Traxos, I guess, is included in that, because Traxos was not in the story either. Behind Tatiova, an island, and a Saproling token once again. We move on to a pack with Teferi on the front. We can maybe talk about Teferi if we open Teferi, which would be kind of nice. We have a repeat in Invoke the Divine. Another Vidalian Arcanist, a repeat again. A Llanowar Scout, once again, it's a different card, but still a Llanowar Elf of some kind. And once again, trying to somewhat help you ramp. I mean, there's arguments as to whether you believe that this is truly a ramp card or not. It does let you kind of play an extra land per turn, but eventually you're going to run out of those, so yeah. But it helps you out with your mana. You have a Stronghold Confessor, again, seemingly another generic Cabal enemy. Same thing with talking about Demonic Vigor, getting a demonic boost from Demon Lord Belzenlok. You have Call the Cavalry once again, Ancient Animus again, Power Stone Shard again, lots of duplicates here. Unwind, another example of Joyra. This is obviously Joyra on this art, showing off some of her magical abilities. She may not be a Planeswalker, but she has been hanging out with Planeswalkers for years and has many, many different abilities. She has, thanks to some time shenanigans, she is much older than most, especially someone like our next pack art, Jaya Ballard, who is older, but it shows. With Joyra, it does not, and she is quite old. So, yeah, this is just an example of Joyra showing off some of her magic. Once again, like I mentioned, an Artificer and the current captain of the Weatherlight. We have the Deathbloom Thallid. It's a fungus. This is typical for Dominaria. Plenty of fungi, creatures, saproling creatures, and Thallids in general being the kind of the overarching name for these fungus. We have a Lingering Phantom. This was one of the I think the art that was chosen during that, I guess, dungeon crawl, if you will, that Teferi and his daughter went on, with some help after the fact from the likes of Liliana, Gideon, Joyra, etc., where he was actually able to be successful at that point. This was one of the things that came out to affect them, and Liliana was kind of able to manipulate them partially because they are in and of themselves undead, so she was able to manipulate them to help out a bit on her end. And that's our first uncommon. The second is the Sorcerer's Wand. Once again, talking about the Tolarian Academy. Wizards are a thing, and they get to train, and they have things like a wand, and so it being an equipment makes sense. It goes in the wizard deck, etc. And we have the Mending of Dominaria as our saga, our rare saga. So 2 sagas in a row. The Mending is a huge deal. There are literally huge discussions on pre-mending versus post-mending, what that did to Planeswalkers. Nicol Bolas's entire plan leading up to this point and going forward is him attempting to get his pre-mending powers back because they were taken from him during the events of the Mending, which occurred on Dominaria, but affected the entirety of the multiverse, and once again, like I said, affected how Planeswalkers acted and interacted. You could, to use modern terminology, it essentially nerfed the ability of every Planeswalker ever, existing ones and future ones that had yet to be born. So kind of a big deal. Once again, with the sagas, I encourage you to look it up fully for yourself. This was another one that was kind of a big deal. Behind the Mending, as we talked about earlier, we have Whisper. Whisper was the Cabal agent who oversaw the fighting pit, in the story at least, and who Gideon and Chandra kind of came up against, and Chandra was able to take care of with quite a bit of increased pyromancy that she gained from one training session with Jaya Ballard, which you can go watch our other videos to hear our opinions on why we think that didn't make a ton of sense. But anyway, behind that, a Mountain and a Knight token. Speaking of Jaya Ballard, I showed her to you already, but here she is again. In her pack we have an Artificer's Assistant, once again just a cute little bird, holding a little tool in its beak, helping out an Artificer. Lovely. Keldon Warcaller. So once again, Keldon warlords and their hosts are a big deal. So you have things like war horns, and someone's got to blow that war horn. So here's your Warcaller. You have a Knight of New Benalia again, a Deep Freeze. The Ice Age did occur on Dominaria. It is not straight up a thing anymore, although ice magic is still something that exists. So here is Deep Freeze, another Drudge Sentinel, a Mammoth Spider. This is just a good old callback to giant spiders and things of the like. This is not anything new. We have a Divination, classic, draw 2 cards. It's just another mage using their abilities, artificer, looking at things, astronomer, whatever you want to call it. This is, again, somewhat generic. We have a Mesa Unicorn, so showing unicorns, horses, Pegasuses or Pegasi. I actually genuinely have no idea, but that was a big thing on Dominaria, and so here it is back again. This is just a great 2/2 for 2 with lifelink, which is quite the bear. We have an Aesthir Glider. Once again, it is a construct. It is seemingly, well, yeah, it is operating on its own, but this is a reprint from Alpha, which is awesome. And still not a bad card. We have a Rampaging Cyclops. Again, this mentions Keldons. Otherwise, past that, I'm not sure of any particular story significance, except that there are also big, stompy, scary creatures on Dominaria, in case you weren't aware. Speaking of classic Dominaria, speaking of Alpha, here is Sarah Angel, one of the classics. You have things like Shivan Dragon, which everybody knows. Well, I don't want to say everybody, right? You don't want to throw everybody in like that. That's not appropriate. But Sarah Angel is one of those classic cards. If you talk to any old school Magic player, many new school Magic players, they will know what Sarah Angel is, what it does, what its mana cost is. It is very iconic. So here is Sarah Angel, our first uncommon. We have a Diligent Excavator. Once again, it is an artificer talking about the fact that it's an excavator. So a lot of Dominaria's history, a lot of its constructs, a lot of things from its past are long buried. And so you have something like a Diligent Excavator, an artificer, digging down and trying to find new things. And that could be either positive or negative, depending on the motives or the motivations of someone like this excavator. And we have a Banalish Marshal. From the card set itself, there are multiple sets of 3 of the same color of mana casting cost. So this one is just the Banalish one. It gives your creatures, other creatures you control, +1/+1. It's somewhat of an anthem, and it is a knight from Benalia. So there is that. Our yeah, we have Arvad the Cursed, our legendary creature. So Arvad is one of the new members of the new Weatherlight crew. He is someone who was not initially recruited by Joyra, despite the fact that everyone else, except for arguably Slimefoot, was recruited by Joyra. But he kind of just showed up one day while Joyra was gone, formed a friendship with Tiana, helped her, helped save the Weatherlight. And so he was allowed to be a member. If I remember correctly, I think he seemed to meld very well with the rest of the group. And it was a Knight of Benalia who then was bitten by and turned into a vampire, hence the black and white. Then we have another Plains and an Elemental token. We have Karn on the next pack. I would love to open me a Karn because even though I am doing a Vorthos booster box opening, that does not mean that I don't enjoy money. We have a Gitu Chronicler, actually the first of the Gitu that we have opened. Joyra, famously of the Gitu. There's literally a card called Joyra of the Gitu. The Gitu are fire mages, if you will. This is a human wizard. A lot of these you will find go well in the Wizard's deck, which is the blue-red deck, which are Joyra's, both of Joyra's colors. But still, you have Gitu, once again, classic fire mages on Dominaria. You have Dub. When someone is dubbed a knight, that is what is happening here. They become a knight, they get +2/+2, and they gain first strike. It's a great card. I love the flavor of it. The art is really sweet. It just makes sense that it is a card, and I love the simplicity of the name that still means so much. You have a Relic Runner. Once again, this seems pretty generic to me. A human rogue stealing some of the relics that are all over Dominaria. So we have an Arbor Armament, once again, relatively generic in terms of the concept of giving something a bow and arrow, allowing it to be a little bit stronger and have reach because it can stop things that are flying. Another Stronghold Confessor. Shiv and Fire, once again, Shiv being an area of the plane that had been phased out similar to Zhalfir, but prior to the mending, in fact, the moment that led to the mending was Teferi bringing back Shiv, phasing it back in, which was something that he wanted to do in order to show that he could before he tried to bring Zhalfir back, just to make sure that he didn't further destabilize the plane. And bringing Shiv back, which he was successful in doing, was what immediately preceded the mending. So you have a Sparring Construct, once again, seems pretty generic. It's a fighting construct. Gideon's Reproach, you got to see this in the story with Gideon in the fighting pit. Gideon was not as willing to use his protective abilities because he didn't want to be found out and set upon by the entirety of the Cabal. So he was just kind of in the pit, punching dudes in the face. And so here is a picture, the art of Gideon punching a Cabal member in the face. And again, it's flavorful because it deals 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. Makes perfect sense to me. We talked about the Elves of Llanowar. Here are the Llanowar Elves. Once again, helping you with your mana, helping you ramp, helping you get out your bigger creatures faster, or even some of your medium-sized creatures still out faster. We have a Thallid Omnivore, once again, more fungus creatures. This one paying you off for having Saprolings, because if this thing eats a Saproling, you gain 2 life, but no matter what it eats, it gets bigger. We have another Sentinel of the Pearl Trident as our first uncommon, a Thorn Elemental. So this is just an Elemental from Dominaria, but notably this card, it's been a while, but look it up. This card has been reprinted many, many times. I personally remember playing with this card way back when I was younger in high school. This is a really good time. I enjoy this card. Some people might say it's a little expensive, but it does get to deal damage as though it weren't blocked, which I think the Rhox creatures used to do, R-H-O-X, the kind of sentient rhino creatures. So there you go. And then we have a Thran Temporal Gateway. This reminds me of cards like Belby's Portal and things like that from original Dominaria, or the original sets on Dominaria, where you could just put something from your hand directly onto the battlefield for a mana cost. So this is tap 4, tap it, and just put a historic permanent onto the battlefield. So if you have a historic permanent that is very expensive, this card is a way to do it. I mean, obviously it's 4 to play and then 4 to use each time, but a repeatable effect like this for a format like Commander, where bigger creatures are a huge deal, this may very well be something that could be quite useful. And I don't mean to just limit it to Commander, because there are plenty of expensive Slyn Voda, right, is the creature that I think of, because then on turn 5, arguably, you could get Slyn Voda out on the field. But regardless, that's just an example. But again, in terms of the Vorthos aspects of it, yeah, this very much reminds me of Belby's Portal. That's kind of the card that I think of when I see this. And our legendary creature is Urgaros, the Empty One. So Urgaros was, I think, one of the last cameo appearances of a random legendary creature from Dominaria. We got to see Urgaros when they being the Weatherlight crew, were fighting against Yargle, and they'd kind of just been able to beat Yargle, and then Urgaros comes out to try to stop them once again. He is a Spectre. Liliana attempted to, I believe it's a he, I apologize if I'm misusing a pronoun there, but Liliana attempted to control him and realized it didn't work, and in fact it even said in the story that she noticed that he was empty, hence the Empty One. I appreciated that. I thought that was kind of cool. It's a nice way to kind of throw another character in there, and one that we didn't get too much more of, but it was a callback to if you knew enough about the card, and he seemed quite scary. So there was that as well. Behind Urgoros, just a swamp, and a Saproling token. On to the next pack, we have Tishar. Let's see what Tishar has in store for us. Another legendary creature that, to my knowledge, did not make it into the stories, interestingly enough. There weren't many. We have another Banalish Honor Guard, generic Knight. Come on, cards. A Syncopate. This one showing Teferi showing off his powers in like a really awesome way. I love this art a lot. It's Teferi and his time powers. Another Gitu Chronicler. A Grow from the Ashes. So we were talking about old school tech that is kind of hidden around on the plane. So this is another example of it. This is a Phyrexian Colossus, so not quite Mishra tech like we were discussing earlier with Traxos, but there are also old Phyrexian machines all over the place. This is one of them. If you look at the old Phyrexian Colossus card, that's exactly what this is. I knew that just looking at it, and this card, Grow from the Ashes, is really cool because it's like another example of nature kind of winning out over everything. So even though this was a Phyrexian construct, there are now trees growing out of it to show that, you know, it's dead and gone, and that's what's taken over. More Llanowar Elves, another sparring construct. Here's an Eviscerate. I don't think there's a lot of, you know, lore behind this, but it is an amazing piece of art and not too hard to see what's going on here. We have another Unwind. We have a Voltaic Servant, which there's not a ton to talk about with this, and it's another older construct, and it has the Voltaic Key as its hand, which is funny because Voltaic Key is a card that does just that. Also, I will point out, it looks like a Thran Dynamo right here. It could just be a generic Thran construct, but it looks a lot like the Thran Dynamo to me. We have a Cast Down, once again, seeming to be, I mean, it talks about the Chainer's Torment on it, which is in and of itself one of the Saga cards, and I believe, and it's our first uncommon and a really sweet removal spell. In Bolus's Clutches, the fourth and final story spotlight card. Interestingly, only 4 story spotlights in this one, despite the fact that in the past, in big sets, quote unquote, we have had 5 story spotlights. This one only had 4. 3 out of the 4 of them featured Liliana. And in this one, you have Liliana having finally completed her contract after Settle the Score that we saw earlier. And now she is being indebted to Nicol Bolas. And as we saw in the story, this was just after they had, you know, it was like Hail the Conquering Heroes, and they were ready to move on to Ravnica together with Jaya, Teferi, Karn, Liliana, Chandra, and Gideon. Liliana ends up, she was going to leave right after Gideon, who left first, but she didn't. She waited around for a minute on her home plane, the plane where she had been vindicated, and had, you know, finally found some friends or some companions in her life, and found that she couldn't planeswalk away, and that's when Bolas finally did show and basically said, "You're mine now, come with me," which is what the flavor text is indicating to us on this card. Really interesting moment, and should have some cool implications for the upcoming sets. Zhalfirin Void. Another thing, first of all, this card is super sad, and when they talked about it in the story, it was super sad. But to look at the Zhalfirin Void, just the concept of the fact that Zhalfir is still phased out, and you have examples like Quende, who is discussing the fact that he believes that his ancestor, Majetta the Lion, is just gone because of Teferi, and that's not entirely true. We might still see them return because now that Teferi has his spark back, thanks to Joyra, he might be able to come back and phase Zhalfir back in. It's just that the last time that he did that, he caused the mending. So I'm curious how they're going to handle that and what that might mean for if and when he does come back into, or back to Dominaria to bring his home back in. We'll see how that works for him. And we have a foil uncommon legendary creature, and another one that did not find his way into the stories, and it is Grun the Lonely King. I love this card. It is so sweet. I'm actually super happy to have it in foil, and that foiling pattern is really awesome. Look at that. Look at how cool that is. I like that quite a bit. He looks great with all those like spikes or trails coming off of him. That looks really cool. And our rare or mythic is wow, this is a sweet pack. A mythic in Lyra Dawnbringer. So in terms of stories, Lyra was kind of thrown in there. She was towards the beginning. She was talking to Tiana a bit. I think she helped Liliana and Gideon out. She was not very prominent in the stories whatsoever, but if we're discussing value, she is definitely up there, so I am super happy to have gotten a Lyra Dawnbringer, especially, like I said, in a pack where we got a foil Grun as well. That was kind of cool. So after Lyra, we have a Forest and a Saproling token. We have another Tashar pack here. Let's see if Tashar is going to keep helping us out with sweet stuff, because that last one sure was. We have Radiating Lightning. This is just another example of a spell messing up the Cabal. We have Adamant Will. Once again, this kind of showing that the Banalish knights or warriors or soldiers this stained glass is not just your generic stained glass that you might find here on Earth. It is strengthened, fortified, etc. And so it is able to shatter a sword against it, as opposed to a real stained glass window, like I said, on Earth, where I'm pretty sure if you tried hard enough, you could just put your fist through it. So we have another Vidalian Arcanist, another Mammoth Spider, Feral Abomination. Once again, this is just seemingly just a denizen of Urborg, a Thrall denizen of Urborg. We didn't see a lot of those just because the Cabal kind of took over Urborg, so there weren't as many like crazy scary things around, but here's one of them. It's a 5/5 Death Touch for 6 to give you an indication of how scary it is. Another Voltaic Servant. Run Amok. So in the stories, this art was shown when they were discussing Radha. I don't believe this is supposed to be Radha herself. It just doesn't look like her. I think this is just a female Keldon warrior, but it was shown for Radha, which I think is odd because Radha has her own card and art, but they used that later on in the stories. Another Gideon's Reproach. Another Thallid Omnivore, another Deathbloom Thallid, more Thallids, Spore Swarm. Look at this. Look at this Saproling theme in this pack. This would have been a cool pack for Sealed. But it's a Spore Swarm, once again, just swarming Saprolings. So you can make some 1/1 Saprolings. It's our first uncommon. Another In Bolus's Clutches, great card. And another Diligent Excavator. And so our rare or mythic legendary is a Marwyn the Nurturer. Okay, so maybe I misspoke when I said that there were few legendary creatures that didn't show up in the story. Marwyn is another one that did not show up in the stories. I like the story that this card seems to be depicting. With her abilities and her art and stuff, you can kind of read it into her card, so she may not have needed to show up in the stories because of that. So I like that. I think that's really cool. It's a great way to tell a story on a card without actually needing to put her into the stories. Behind her, a Forest and a Teferi emblem. That's sweet. I think that's my first Teferi emblem. So there you go. We move on to the next pack here. We're getting there. We're almost done. Let's see what else we can get. Another example of a Gitu human wizard, and this one is the Gitu Lava Runner. Again, fire magic. A Serra Disciple. Not a lot of Serra discussion so far in this particular opening, but yeah, Serra was a thing, and there are still those devoted to Serra or disciples of Serra running around or acting in her name and still following her teachings and things like that. So here is an example of that with a Bird Cleric. A Talarian Scholar. Speaking of people that are still around, you still have students at Talaria Academy, Raph of the Weatherlight being one of them for at least a period of time. And we get to see Joda in the stories for a bit as well. So just a generic example of someone at Talaria. We have a Corrosive Ooze. There are a lot of examples of old school ooze cards. This is just another, nature construct green kind of a thing. Another Cabal Paladin, an Academy Drake. So once again, Academy, referring to the Tolarian Academy. In fact, you can see either the main Academy or Talaria West down there. We have another Demonic Vigor, another Power Stone Shard. Come on now. Another Shivan Fire. Another Call the Cavalry, a lot of duplicates. A Fight with Fire. This is seemingly just another generic Jaya is a badass pyromancer card. There are plenty of them and I love them, and this card is no different from that. It does kind of show Jaya. This was one of the promo images that they used for Jaya back when they revealed that she was going to be back on Dominaria, and it showed, you know, she has aged. We've been gone a while, so that's kind of cool. We have a Gaia's Blessing. I love this card so much. I encourage you, if you have never seen or if you don't know that you've seen the original Gaia's Blessing art, look at it. Go look at it and then look at this art and realize that this art is a spiritual successor, right? To that art. It's really, really cool that they were able to combine those two like that. I love that they did this way. It really does look like the original art, minus the people. So yeah, I encourage you to go take another look at that if you haven't seen it. I think that's another cool way of telling a story without flavor text. You're doing it with the art itself. And once again, I think this is the second one of the box, I think if we go back to the first opening, but we have a Mythic in Phyrexian Scriptures, another saga. You see a lot of depictions like this with Phyrexians. This art reminds me a lot of the Dark Ritual card, one of the old Dark Ritual arts with someone's hand kind of coming out of a crypt, and there's blood dripping and stuff like that. So this is very iconic. I think this was one of the first sagas that was spoiled for us. Beautiful, beautiful piece of art, and a very interesting design that they did with all of these vertical drawings or arts, because it was a new structure to work with. But yeah, Phyrexian Scriptures is a great card as well. Behind it, we have our legendary creature is Yargle. Yargle was in the stories, and originally when we were reviewing the stories, I commented on the fact that Yargle would probably be like thrown in there just to appease the people who loved Yargle and thought he was cool, as a name drop like a lot of these others. Not true. Yargle was utilized and made to be very scary. He was able to go toe-to-toe with the entirety of the Weatherlight. And I don't mean the Weatherlight crew, although they were there too. I mean the entire Weatherlight vehicle, or airship. Yargle was huge. He was able to grab hold of the Weatherlight, not let it move. He was able to keep the Weatherlight crew, as well as Gideon and Liliana, or I'm sorry, just Liliana, off balance. So that was a really cool moment in the story, and a lot of tension and cliffhangers were built up around Yargle. So they did an amazing job with Yargle in the stories. What a contrast to go from this, you know, scary, dark, gloomy image to this bright, happy, beautiful island. Look at that, so bright. And then behind the island, another Weatherlight Saproling token. We move on to another Teferi pack. We're down to the final four. It's not basketball, though. Another Knight of Nubenalia, Befuddle, Skirk Prospector again, come on cards, Sergeant at Arms, Adventurous Impulse again, a Soul Salvage. So this is just the concept of soul magic, but in these stories we saw it most with the Blackblade being able to take souls. We saw it, I talked about that earlier. We have a Yavimaya Sap Herd. So once again, it's another Thallid fungus type creature, but this one actually referencing Yavimaya, one of the main forest biomes on Dominaria. So that's really cool. We have an Aesthir Glider, again, a Rampaging Cyclops again. Broken Bond, so our first Story Spotlight card. This one, pretty self-explanatory. Here is Nissa, back on Zendikar, with some crows there, sure, or ravens or whatever. But showing that there is in fact a blossom or something blooming out of the ground on her home plane. The flavor text describing that she is in fact saying that she can't be in the Gatewatch anymore because they seem to be very focused on other things and not her home plane, her good friend, is still struggling, and she's out there fighting with the Gatewatch, and she was very distraught by that, so she left. I am sure that we will see her again on Ravnica quite soon, but just the tension being built of her having left was a very interesting way to basically start the Gatewatch's story on Dominaria. We have our first uncommon is an uncommon saga in the Eldest Reborn. So this is depicting the moment that Nicol Bolas, having been killed by Tetsuo Umezawa, the father or ancestor of Tetsuko Umezawa, one of the legends in this set. Bolas was killed by her. He was then resurrected on the plane of Dominaria in front of Teferi and Rada and Joyra and Venser and all those fun, happy people. And Teferi fights Nicol Bolas. You know, there's a Planeswalker duel, and Teferi, who's super cocky about his abilities, because remember, this is pre-mending, so they are essentially godlike beings. Teferi is super confident in his abilities, super cocky about it, and basically goes toe-to-toe with Nicol Bolas and barely lives to regret it. So that's why Teferi, when we see him in these stories, is more than willing to say, hey, Gideon and Liliana, you're going to go fight Nicol Bolas. I'll come with you. I've fought him before. So Teferi kind of knows what he's in for and is one of the few. So, but here is the depiction of Nicol Bolas reawakening before kind of going off to wreak havoc. So here's the Eldest Reborn. Another Zhalfirin Void, and a Siege Gang Commander is our rare. Once again, going with the smaller Goblin sub-theme, Siege Gang Commander, a card, a reprint. And so here you go, you have Siege Gang Commander. Behind it, we talked about him a minute ago, we have Raf Capuchin, the sister, or brother, yeah, he has a sister in Danitha Capuchin. He is a descendant of Gerard, not necessarily the immediate child or grandchild, but a descendant. And he and Danitha, once again, are siblings. When Joyra shows up to ask Danitha to be a member of the crew, Raf steps up as a young teenager and says, you know, my sister doesn't want to go. She said no, but you could take me. Here's all these cool things that Joda had to say about me. I'm great. You know, I'm amazing. And Joyra doesn't really believe him, but takes him anyway, and he turned out to be a pretty darn good member of the crew. He's a pretty good mage, you know, in his own right for being that young. He forms a bond with Slimefoot. He forms a bond with Shauna. So yeah, he was definitely a good member of the crew, and a cool character as well in Raf Capuchin. We have a Mountain and a Saproling token. We have 3 packs remaining, this one with Karn on the front. We have already gotten 2 mythics out of this sleeve, this column, if you will, of packs, so that's kind of cool. Let's see what else we might get. Another Invoke the Divine, Opt. There's a lot of Opt arts, this one showing older Teferi, standing in front of a statue of himself, kind of showing old versus new, and you get to see him in various stages in his different arts for this set. So this was a cool way of showing that as well. Another Gitu character in the Gitu Journey Mage. This one showing how their weapons can be, they can use their fire magic to light weapons on fire as well and utilize that in combat. Another Llanowar elf in the Llanowar Envoy. A Windgrace Acolyte, a Cat Warrior, something that we didn't see too much of, but yeah, this is, I guess, a denizen of Urborg, and it says keeping relics, Urborg relics, out of the Cabal's hands. A Rampaging Cyclops, a Rescue. So this is, once again, showing the different people looking through Dominaria and trying to gather all of the history from the plane up for themselves to either keep it safe or to hoard it or what have you. This one dictating rescue, so it is actually being saved so that it is not destroyed. We have a Blessed Light. I love this art. It is so gorgeous. I want this card in foil very badly. But yeah, we have this card, once again, just showing the abilities of the churches on the plane and what they can do to, I guess, the impure. We have another Yavimaya Sap Herd. Time of Ice. So the Ice Age was a big part of our original time on Dominaria. There is a lot, once again, that goes along with all of these sagas, and things that could be unpacked. I believe one of these two characters depicted down here is Joda himself, and you have the fight with Lim Dull being depicted here. I believe Lim Dull down here at the bottom. Once again, I encourage you to look up the full thing because that could be a full story in and of itself. We have another Thallid example in the Thallid Soothsayer, and another Gaia's Blessing. And our legendary rare or mythic? Oh, nope, sorry, we have a foil first. It is a foil common in the Gitu Lava Runner. Not super valuable necessarily, but it is a cool foiling pattern. Most of the time, if there's fire, it's going to be a cool foiling pattern. And once again, our rare or mythic is Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp. I guess, once again, another legendary creature that did not make his way into the stories, but his ability is really flavorful. The fact that you can tap 6 to just play him, or you can tap 3 and a blue and an untapped artifact to rub the lamp and summon the genie. I think that's super creative and interesting. I love how that works. I also love how that works if you're using any equipment, because equipment doesn't usually tap, and it doesn't matter if equipment is tapped. So you can essentially just get this guy out for 4 mana if you have like a short sword out or something. I've done it a couple times myself. It feels real good. Behind Zahid, a Swamp, and a Saproling token. 2 packs left in this particular opening. We will obviously have a part 3 because there is 1 column remaining. I will say this again. This is the Coldwater Snapper. Look at your flavor texts, look at your card names, and you will see the names of all of the multitude of sets that were previously on Dominaria, this one being Cold Snap. Fervent Strike, this is another Gitu monk or Gitu fighter lighting up their weapon, like I mentioned earlier. Sergeant at Arms again, Befuddle again, come on, another Caligo Skin Witch, another Rescue, a Keldon Raider, once again, showing the Warriors of Keld, this one, I guess, utilizing a mount of some kind to help them out. We have another Mesa Unicorn, another Aesthir Glider. Here is the Chainer's Torment. I was correct. It is an uncommon saga, once again depicting the Chainer's Torment. Again, with the sagas, like I said, I apologize that I can't go more in depth, but this video is long enough. I encourage you to look up the stories of really any and all sagas that are interesting to you. Shield of the Realm, once again, another example of a stained glass weapon, a stained glass infused weapon, and this one being the shield. Another Mending of Dominaria. That's sweet. I'm actually not upset to have gotten this as a duplicate. I like this story a lot. The mending itself is a huge deal. A huge deal. So I like that. I like that quite a bit. We have a foil in the Memorial to Folly. Kind of hard to... Oh, there it is. It was like kind of hard to see the foiling pattern. It's really just the background. But it's cool. I like it quite a bit. I could not 100% tell you who it is depicting. It's a statue holding a staff, so it could be Urza. Urza definitely messed up quite a bit on the plane of Dominaria, and we haven't really talked about him that much in this particular opening, which is interesting to me. But it's a foil uncommon. That's cool. And we have a Slyn Vote of the Rising Deep, another legendary creature that did not make his or her or its way into the stories. A Forest and a Soldier token. We have 1 final pack remaining for this portion of the Vorthos booster box opening. Let's see what it has for us. We have already opened 2 mythics. Let's see what else we might get. Another Banalish Honor Guard, a Gitu Chronicler, Syncopate again, Llanowar Scout, Stronghold Confessor, Shivan Fire, Call the Cavalry, Llanowar Elves, Sparring Construct, Eviscerate again, another, oh, this one's Fungal Plots. I was going to say another Sprout Swarm, but no, it is a green uncommon that cares about Saprolings or focuses on Saprolings, but it's a different theme. This one's Fungal Plots. Same idea, though. Another Sage of Latnam, and we have a Lich's Mastery. Very interesting card. I don't know that it's a good card, but it's definitely interesting. And at least from what I understand, this is depicting Jozu Vess, the brother of Liliana Vess, who was killed by her very early on in these stories. We did not see him, we did not see the story spotlight card depicting his killing, his death, but he was turned into a general by Demon Lord Belzenlach, who has done everything on the plane of Dominaria, if you haven't heard. And you have Liliana getting revenge for that and kind of having that be, kind of killing her brother, fixing her mistake. And, I mean, Belzenlach did it to torture her, to a degree. And so you have her getting revenge for that and kind of dictating the rest of her journey throughout Dominaria with it. So, kind of a big deal, Jozu Vess, to this set of stories. And this art is really sweet. I mean, look at how cool that looks. Behind Lich's Mastery, we have Halar, the Fire Fletcher. Again, another legendary creature that was not depicted in the stories, but I can say that Halar was stated by the wizard's staff to be an officially canonical non-binary character, which for people that would relate to that, that's really cool. I did hear some people saying, rightfully so, that they were then upset that the non-binary character was made, but not depicted in the stories, but hopefully this is a show of a step in the right direction. Behind Halar, an island, and a knight token. So guys, we got some sweet stuff. Some really sweet stuff in this one. We got 2 Mendings of Dominaria. I only have 1 here, but I wanted to show it to you. It's probably my favorite saga, not necessarily for the art, but for what it's discussing and the story behind it. I love it so much. I think the Mending is so important to Magic's past and future, and it's a super big line delineating those kinds of stories one way or the other. So I think that story-wise is important and a good thing to show off for this Vorthos booster box opening. We had a foil Grun. I just thought it was cool. I think he's cool. I like that we got a foil legendary. We got our mythics in Phyrexian Scriptures, and the one that I will leave you looking at is Lyra, Dawnbringer. She is an angel. She was lightly depicted in the story, but she is a great card. Really, really good. If you have not gotten a chance to play with her, I highly encourage it because she's great. Guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this, our part 2. Once again, like I said, we will have part 3. If you want to know more about the Dominaria stories, and you have not gotten a chance to watch our review series of it, when I say our, I mean myself and my fiancée Amy, have reviewed the stories on the channel, so you can definitely go check that out by clicking the link that will be popping up on your screen shortly. If you click on our logo or tap on our logo when it pops up on the screen, you can subscribe and find out when part 3 of this video comes out, when more of our story reviews come out, because there are more stories coming, and we will be reviewing those, don't you worry. And we still might have some more Dominaria content coming out on this channel. So, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been another part of the Vorthos booster box opening for Dominaria here on Geek for All. I have been Joe. Thank you so much. And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.